Good morning.
Morning.
So we are quorate, so we can continue. Actually, today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using this public seating area, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of these images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to the meeting. With members in the chamber, please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please only turn on your camera when you wish to speak, and please remember to switch off when you have finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the planning committee, and any mobile phones, iPads are switched off or on silent. Okay, thank you. We have apologies from Councillors Jason Jordan and John Reynolds. Does anybody have any declarations of interest today? No? Okay, thank you. We've all received the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of June. Does anybody agree with those minutes? Okay, proposed and second, thank you. Sorry, you have no problems? One second. Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for an amendment to the attendees list, because I'm listed as Councillor Howells, but there are two Councillor Howells, so just if my initial could go in there, that would be great.
Okay.
On the minutes, there's no entry on the questions that I asked or me opposing the application on application 228.
Okay.
Chair, the minutes are quite well, basic, really. They just give them what happened, rather we don't report everything that everyone says in the minutes.
There's no detailed minutes of what.
No, it is.
Okay, I just wondered whether it was recorded that I objected and Councillor Saeed objected.
No, the minutes are just basic representation.
So there is no detailed minutes.
Well, there is a recording, obviously, on the film, so that can be seen, but there is no other written record. There's no written record, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, your colleagues' records were recorded, but we don't make any records of people who speak at the meeting. Okay.
Is that always then? We don't get any detailed of any of the meetings? Always like that? Okay.
If I'm right, it should be in. Can you turn your mic off, please? The councillor who put in his records are recorded, but anybody will be in official ones, but not for public yet.
So the minutes that you've had circulated are the minutes, the official minutes of the meeting, but as Joanne's explained, we do have a recording of the meeting as well. So anybody who wants to look back and check who said what and who objected to what is obviously in there. But with regard to Councillor Adnan's objections, they were reported as late representation. So they would have been minuted as part of the application.
Okay, thank you. So can we have a proposer for the minutes? Councillor Jenkins, and a seconder. Thank you. But we now go on to the planning application schedule. And item number 1, page 17 to 57. Application number 210988 to be presented by Grant Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for the construction of a 3-storey manufacturing, research and development facility and administration office with external associated works at plot 1 and 5 Celtic Way, Imperial Way. The recommendation is for the application to be granted with conditions subject to a Section 106 legal agreement with delegated powers to refuse the application in the event that the agreement is not signed within 3 months of the decision. So a similar application was submitted under this reference number previously. It was presented to Planning Committee in February 2022. So the existing members from the committee are likely to be familiar with the site and this scheme. In February, it was agreed by Planning Committee to grant the proposal with conditions, subject to a legal agreement, and no objections from Natural Resources Wales, as final comments were outstanding at the time. So we did receive a no objection response from Natural Resources Wales. However, during the process of finalising the legal agreement, the applicant advised us that the scheme that was agreed to be granted no longer suited their requirements. As such, it was agreed that changes could be made in relation to the design, scale and layout of the main building with some external alterations to the site, and that these could be submitted under the existing reference number as new documents to be considered. The application was given a new start date, new consultations were undertaken, and it has been considered effectively as a fresh application. So this is where we're at the moment. We're bringing that application back to committee for consideration, albeit we previously agreed to approve something on site of a very similar nature and scale to this. I'll just point out now, there was a late representations report sent round that everyone should have received. It just related to the tweaking of 2 conditions, condition 4 and 9, just in relation to the trigger points after further comments from consultees following the publication of the officer report. So this is the site outlined in red. The main area is plot 1, the largest portion of the site that you can see here. It's divided by North Lake Drive, and there's a small section which is plot 5 located here. The site is set within the Imperial Way sort of industrial and commercial site. To the north is the IQE buildings. To the north and northeast is the recently approved and under construction data centres, the Vantage data centres that, again, existing committee members will be familiar with. To the wider area, there's residential properties and vegetated areas and landscaping, which we'll touch upon now within the site constraints and designations. So the site's previously developed land within the urban boundary. It is allocated within the local development plan for employment use. It's within parking zone 5 as per the parking standards that have been adopted. There's a site of importance of nature conservation to the south of plot 5 and to the south of plot 1 behind the highway. And in the wider area, there's archaeologically sensitive area, Wentloog level special landscape area, Gwent level site of special scientific interest, and then residential properties as previously referred to in the aerial slide. So there's just a few photos from site just to give you some context of the current situation on the ground. The top left photo is views taken from Celtic Way, northeast across the site. So in the top of that photo there, on the left-hand side, you can see the existing IQE building, and just sort of to the right-hand side of the photo, you can see the partially constructed data hall that was granted in 2020 by committee. The next photo looks at views back towards Celtic Way across the site in a southwest direction. The bottom left-hand photo looks south down Celtic Way. These are the existing 2 IQE buildings, and our site is just located in the backdrop here. And then finally, the bottom right-hand photo is views west taken from South Lake Drive. So This building here is one of the currently under construction data halls. We've got the IQE buildings just over here, and our site is just located in the centre, in the backdrop between these two buildings. So in terms of the applicant is SPTS Technologies Limited. They currently operate from the site at Ringland Way, which is just off the Calder roundabout, accessed off the SDR road. The proposal is for their new headquarters and for their relocation. So SPTS design, manufacture and sell semiconductor capital equipment, which involves solutions to deliver the next generation of technologies for the semiconductor and microelectronics industry. They've been recognised by the Queen over the last decade or so for their and have won awards with regards to enterprise and innovation. And they've also been recognised by Welsh Government for their contribution to increasing jobs and growing the economy in Wales, and they've been given Ancony Compass status. SPTS currently employ 360 people within the existing Newport site. However, that is predicted to be outgrown by the middle of 2023, hence why they're looking to relocate and expand, and this application has been submitted. The applicant have had no redundancies in the last 12 years and have experienced 11 years of consecutive growth. The average salary in Wales for the company is just over £43,000. So the proposal is for their new headquarters and associated works. The building is a maximum of 160 metres wide, a maximum depth of 61 metres, and a height of 18.3 metres to the parapet, but 18.9 metres to the highest point. This will condense the existing Ringland Way site and an existing off-site storage facility at Stevenson Street onto one site which is approximately 50% bigger. The site will initially accommodate up to 450 staff, with 360 being on shift at any one time. And this first phase is designed to accommodate up to 650 members of staff based on future growth projections over the next few years. The expansion of land also under the ownership of the applicant adjacent to the site is being considered, and it's possible that this would lead to the creation of a European hub for KLA Corporation, who are the parent company of SPTS, albeit that would be subject to obviously new planning consent. The Cardiff University study in 2019 forecasted that there would be 3.2 jobs created within the supply chain for every one job created for SPTS. The building is being designed to BREEAM excellence and incorporate sustainable provisions, and this is required to be achieved by the applicant in order to unlock their funding for the project. So the key considerations that we looked at within the officer report were the principle of development, the economic and social impact of the proposal, the design of the building, impact on ecology, trees and surrounding landscaping, impact on highway safety and parking, active travel provision, residential amenity and air quality, drainage and flooding, and impact on heritage and archaeology. So this is the proposed site layout. The main building is located fairly centrally within the plot. It's spread over 3 stories and will provide approximately 17,500 square metres of internal space. To the north is the service area, access off Celtic Way and exit onto Northlake Drive. To the south of the site is the parking area, which will provide 238 parking spaces, electric vehicle charging point spaces, disabled spaces, motorcycle bays and cycle stores. Landscaping and ecological improvements are situated around the site boundaries, and Plot 5 includes a balancing pond, which forms part of the overall drainage strategy for the site. So this is the design of the building that was previously agreed to be approved by Planning Committee in February, just to give you an idea of its scale and its appearance in comparison to what we're considering today, which is this building. So outlined in red is the previously submitted building, just to give you an idea of the change in scale and reduction in height. The proposed building is up to 3 stories in scale, with the administrative area being of a contemporary design with full height glazing layered horizontally across the main facade. Each story is articulated and detailed with recessed flashing to reduce the overall perception of its mass. Vertical fins are proposed for solar shading and arranged in a pattern to draw focus to the main entrance, which is further identified by a 2-storey recess and a feature copper frame to create a clear focal point for the building. The elements of the building that contain the manufacturing and storage processes are defined by a more functional appearance to reflect their use, which predominantly comprises of vertical and horizontal cladding. Details of materials are being controlled by condition, so we can agree the exact extent of those in the future. So these are a couple of just computer-generated images, just to give you an idea of how it is anticipated the building would look once it is built out. And this is a proposed visualisation of the site. Again, you can just see the existing industrial and commercial context surrounding the site and how this will fit into the existing industrial park. And this is just a sample floor plan. I'm not going to go through each one because there's a lot of detail. But yeah, this just gives you an idea of the ground floor, the entrance lobby, which leads to a corridor which leads to the staff canteen and welfare areas, preparation and scrub area, manufacturing and office space, and then storage space to the right-hand side. No, sorry, wrong way. So as we move on to neighbouring amenity, we've had no objections for environmental health subject to some conditions. The site is located approximately 300 to 400 metres from the existing residential noise receptors, and nothing has significantly changed since what was considered previously by committee. There's industrial uses and buildings and vegetation intervening between the site and the wider residential area. So Environmental Health have just requested some conditions in relation to the external plant, installation of the external plant which is proposed, and controls over the noise that will emit, construction environmental management plan, restriction of hours of any piling work, albeit none is proposed as things currently stand, and the final detail of internal and external lighting, which will need to be agreed. And then we've also restricted the building use to what the applicant has applied for, as anything beyond that which could be permitted may cause a different impact that we'd like to consider should we need to. Moving on to ecology. So there are some sensitive ecology receptors within the vicinity of the site as listed in the designations, and we've looked at these in detail within the report. So overall, an ecological impact assessment has been submitted with the application, which has been supported by survey documents and reports. The Council's ecologist has offered no objections to the proposed mitigation, compensation and enhancement which is proposed. However, they have requested a condition to ensure that this is included on the soft landscaping plan to avoid any ambiguity, and so we know exactly what we're getting. So that is recommended as a condition. Natural Resources Wales have also been consulted as the statutory consultee, and they have offered no objections. They have requested a few conditions, one of which is a dormouse conservation strategy, because they are known to be in the wider area. They've removed their request for a waterfall conservation strategy since the last application, as the context of the site has changed. And then they just require a condition regarding the ecological camp to make sure that the environment is protected during the construction period, and that there's an introduction of native planting mix as part of the proposed planting for the scheme. So they're all controlled by the recommended conditions. In terms of the landscape and visual impact, the site is split over 2 plots, as you would have seen in this proposed site plan. The landscape officer has offered no objections to the proposal in principle, but has raised some concerns regarding the detail of the external proposals, layout and soft landscaping. A landscape visual impact assessment was initially submitted. However, the landscape officer didn't feel that this adequately assessed the overall impacts of the proposal. We did request that a revised LVA was submitted. However, this has not been received. It's not a statutory document. We don't absolutely require it, and we can't insist on it that it is submitted, albeit it can be useful. However, in this case, we have made an assessment based on the information that has been submitted on the officers on site visits the officer has undertaken from various viewpoints, which were requested by the landscape officer. So this is just the indicative landscaping plan, which further details is being controlled via condition. So obviously we'll assess those with the landscape officers and NRW when conditions are discharged in the future. So in terms of the wider impact of the proposed development, this is taken approximately 3 kilometres from the site along the Wales coastal path, which was considered to be a key receptor by the landscape officer. You can just about see underneath this arrow the existing buildings within the industrial park, and given that the building proposed today is of a comparable scale and height to those buildings, it's not considered that this is going to introduce any visual harm or any visual impact over and above the existing situation on site. Similarly, taken from a public footway near St Mary's Church in Marshfield at 2.5 kilometres from the site, you can just about see buildings in the backdrop, and again it's considered that the building proposal will integrate appropriately into the existing setting. Photos taken from the nearest residential properties at Edmondsbury Road. You can see there's intervening vegetation, and there's not really any views visible towards the site from this area. And then this is a photo taken this month from the northwest of the site. This is the approved data centre on the left-hand side, the existing IQE building, and the building proposed is just going to fit into here. So again, not consider that there's going to be any harmful impact on the visual amenity of the area. Finally then, this is taken from Celtic Way, looking south, the existing IQE buildings, and this is an elevation here showing the building proposed, which will just slot in here, just to the south of the furthest building there. So overall, whilst the site does face a sensitive landscape, it's considered that it will integrate appropriately into the surrounding area, given the context of the existing buildings and the proposed buildings that have recently been approved of a similar scale. And yeah, as long as we condition the landscaping details, which we have done, then there's no reason to believe that we couldn't achieve a suitable landscaping proposal for the scheme. Moving on to highway safety and parking, owing to the scale of the development, a transport assessment was submitted with the application, along with TRIX data and data from the existing SBTS site at Ringland Way. The Council's Highways officers reviewed the transport assessment and is satisfied that the traffic impact on the surrounding area will not be significant. This is partially due to there being split shifts for workers at the site, which don't coincide with peak traffic hours within the wider area. In terms of parking, against the parking standards, we have considered the application. There's a mix of uses within the proposal, so we've looked at the parking generation for each use, adapted the relevant floor area for each use, and come up with an overall parking demand for the scheme, which is 478 spaces. This is a section of the site layout plan which shows the parking area. So there are 438 parking spaces proposed, which is an 8% shortfall against the adopted guidance, and as such that has resulted with an objection from Highways. There'd be 5% disabled parking bays, 25% of bays would be installed with electric vehicle charging points, 6% of the parking bays would be car share bays, there'd be an additional 21 motorcycle bays and 64 covered cycle spaces. £50,000 financial contribution from the applicant has been secured, or has been agreed, and is being secured by a legal agreement. This will go towards an increased provision of cycle and pedestrian way along Celtic Way, which you can just see sort of the indicative location highlighted in yellow on the plan there. So at present, there isn't any footway along this section of Celtic Way, so it doesn't encourage people or users of the site in the future to access the site on foot or via cycle, and obviously that is a key part of the proposal that we need to make sure is suitable and in accordance with active travel provisions and national policy. So this work would be undertaken by the Council's projects team prior to the occupation of the building, which is likely to be in approximately 3 years' time. So overall, there is an 8.6% shortfall against the adopted parking standards guidance document, and Highways have objected. However, national planning policy is clear in encouraging a modal shift from the reliance of private forms of transport and car-dependent development, and seeks to encourage active travel. Specifically, policies 2 and 12 of Future Wales, the national plan, which was adopted last year, expects the planning system to promote a modal shift away from the use of cars and to prioritise active travel modes, including walking and cycling. So the applicant has proposed 64 long-term cycle spaces, which would be covered and is in accordance with the Sustainable Travel SPG. They've also provided changing and shower facilities for the cyclists to encourage active travel to work. A £50,000 financial contribution has been secured, or will be secured, via legal agreement towards the cost of the footway and cycleway on Celtic Way, and this will enhance sustainable access to the site for employees and is considered to be an essential part of the scheme in order to make the scheme acceptable in relation to this matter. So on balance, taking into account the proposed improvements and the financial contribution and the wider benefits of the scheme, it is considered that the minor shortfall in parking is acceptable and wouldn't result in an adverse impact on highway safety or parking. So in terms of air quality, an air quality assessment was submitted and reviewed by Environmental Health with no issues raised. The site isn't located within an air quality management area or within a buffer zone, and a technical note has been submitted by applicants showing HGV routes during construction period, which would avoid the AQMAs within Newport, and that has been agreed by the air quality officer, and that is controlled via condition. The site isn't located within a flood zone, so no FCA has been required, but owing to the scale of the site, sustainable drainage systems or SUDS approval is required. This is a separate piece of legislation from planning and will be assessed by the Council's SAB department. A SAB application has been submitted, and in initial informal discussions with the SAB officer have not raised any concerns regarding the strategy put forward, which includes permeable paving areas, underground attenuation, natural features such as swales, rainwater harvesting systems and the attenuation pond. So overall we're satisfied that the site layout provided and proposed could accommodate the requirements of SAB. There have been no objections from consultees in relation to the impact on heritage or archaeology nearby the area. So overall, in summary, the proposal involves the reuse of previously developed land within the urban boundary, which is allocated for employment use in the local development plan. It would allow STPS to expand their process and expand their workforce from 360 staff to 450 staff initially on occupation of the building, with the future expansion predicted to be up to 650 staff. Future expansion opportunities onto the adjacent plot would be available, subject to the relevant planning consents, and could look at relocating existing European processes for the parent company to Newport, creating further job opportunities. So Highways are satisfied with the overall impact on the road network, but have objected to the 8.6% parking shortfall against the guidance. But for reasons outlined within this report and the presentation, these are considered to be acceptable by officers. No impact or no adverse impact on air quality. The proposal will result in the reduction of vehicle trips across Newport between the existing storage site at Stevenson Street and the headquarters at Ringland Way. Obviously, the financial contribution towards the improvement of cycle and pedestrian routes at Celtic Way and the mitigation, compensation and enhancement of ecological matters. And then obviously subject to the details of soft landscaping being conditioned, the landscape officer has no objections. So overall, just to reaffirm the condition, we're recommending that the application is granted with conditions, subject to the signing of the Section 106 legal agreement, with delegated powers to refuse the application in the event that the legal agreement is not signed within 3 months of this decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on now to public speakers reporting. That's Mr. Nigel Williams.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. SPTS Technologies is a Welsh Government anchor status company. We're a truly homegrown Welsh business. We've been developing and manufacturing in Wales over 40 years throughout our previous company brands of STS and Avisa Technologies. We are what we consider to be a Welsh business. The semiconductor sector is recognised by Welsh Government and Newport Council as critical to the economical growth and development in Wales. This development represents a significant capital investment into Wales, creating a bespoke 17,000 square metre facility, accommodating up to 750 employees. I just want to touch on one point. Whereas the 380 circa staff that was referenced in the report, we have recruited and accelerated beyond those numbers and have exceeded 400 staff, and we continue to look for more staff. We're very proud of the growth we have. So in all, we look to achieve a further 300 jobs by 2028. And as I say, we're recruiting ahead of plans. KLA investing in this site as this European headquarters. We have the capacity and the intent to develop further and to grow our business. Expanding in Wales allows us to tap into the valuable supply chain and staff skills that we so require. Keeping our staff employed and staff retention is critical. Parking issue raised by Grant or by the Highways officer, we acknowledge. We have taken a positive mitigation strategy. We previously on schemes had designed for some 80 plus car parking bays on the north of Plot 5. Plot 5 we respect and acknowledge has significant ecological and biodiversity challenges. that would stall all developments going onto Plot 1 or Plot 5. It is essential for our business growth, for our recruitment drive and the expansion of our business that we commence construction on Plot 1 immediately. So the mitigation strategy we've taken is to make a further application independent of this on Plot 5. That will cover additional parking and highways access on and off Plot 5. It will also look to remove some surplus topsoil and arisings that have been created throughout the development of the industrial park, and we would undertake that as a separate planning application. Parking facilities for our staff is critical. Staff retention is the core of our business. Highly specialised, trained people. We are STEM ambassadors. We are wise women in STEM and engineering enterprise businesses. We respect and need our staff. We've invested heavily in the quality and the architecture of this facility. It not only is a marketing hub for our business and a manufacturing site. We receive some, over pre-pandemic years, we were receiving over 1,700 visitors from Apple, Intel, Orange and other wider businesses, putting over 1,700 accommodation rooms into the economy. So quality for our visitors, quality for our brand and quality for our staff. We wouldn't look to emulate off-site parking as can be seen from the call centres in the adjacent site. KLA is an industry-leading developer of tools and manufacture. We manufacture the tools that generate the chips and the semiconductor products. All of our devices, all of the technology that we use in this room or at home, it's in our everyday life, and we continue to drive the research and development at the site. As Grant touched on, we are a semiconductor industry giant in the UK. SPTS recognised by leading industry experts, the government and Her Majesty the Queen for our awards for enterprise and international trade, and additionally for Queen's Award for Innovation. SPTS was acquired by the KLA Corporation in February 2019. KLA are supporting, developing and growing our business model in Wales. We distribute over 95% of our tools and products around the world. We distribute over 35 countries and we service wider countries as well. Thank you. We're a responsible employer. We'll respect the ecology, we'll put our staff first and we'll respect our neighbours. The job creation and the immediate start on site is what we look to secure through this planning consent, and we thank you for your support.
I think that was the alarm to say your time is up. Good. Well done. Okay, thank you for that. There's no ward members wishing to speak. However, I just want to check with members that you've had the late representative document for this, yes? Okay, thank you. The ward is Marsfield and Tretyga, and with Councillor Watkins being a member of the ward, we'd like to ask him if he'd like to say anything first before questions.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, it's nice to see another high-tech company coming into that area, and it's a great opportunity for citizens of Newport to get high-quality jobs. I'm sorry about the factory at Ringland is not big enough, but that's part of the good thing that STS have actually done. I do have a few questions, but I'll save those to it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm what's happening in that.
Yeah. I think Councillor Watkins is about to finish then anyway. So we'll go on to the questions now. Do any of the committee have any questions, please? Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for Newport and for high tech in the region. I think one of the concerns I have, and it's an ongoing general concern, is this active travel. And the gentleman said that it's highly skilled people. We've seen that the salaries are above average. We can expect people to apply and to come in from a long way. You know, you said about trying to keep it fairly local in the valleys and around Newport. There is a big problem with active travel insofar as, I mean, do we have a bus route to get people there? We seem to be focusing on the limitations of the cars. And I think that is a big issue going forward. You know, it's not just the employees, you say, you get visitors as well. So the analysis has been done, and I support this, but I do have general reservations going forward that active travel needs to be invested in a much bigger way to really be effective.
Grant?
Thank you, Councillor. I guess in terms of the wider active travel picture, that's obviously something that we have to look at more generally across the council. But it's specifically in terms of this site. I suppose you asked there about is there a bus route. So basically at the moment, this is the A48, which is one of the key access routes for users of the industrial estate. Oh, I'm not showing my screen. Sorry. Here we go. That makes more sense now. Sorry about that. So yeah, we've got the A48, which is one of the main access routes to the site and to the industrial park. So at the moment, there is bus stops along the A48 that people could get off. The issue that we've got at the site, and which has been acknowledged through the assessment by officers, is that the footway terminates approximately around by here. So anyone who did get off the bus and walked lie here to access the site, the footway terminates, and it's just a grass verge either side of the highway. So it's not really encouraging a safe route for people to use and access the site. So it was essential, really, that as part of this scheme, if we were going to be encouraging 360 people per shift to access the site, that we don't want them all coming in on car. And a travel plan was submitted by the applicant in support of the application. And this is why we have asked for the financial contribution to improve active travel on Celtic Way. So a footway and cycleway is being contributed to from the entrance to the site, which is approximately by here, and will run up Celtic Way, linking into the existing infrastructure. So that's why we've asked for the financial contribution to encourage people or users of the site to access in a more sustainable way rather than driving. So hopefully with that link in, which will be undertaken by the council's project team, that will encourage people to access the site via other modes rather than just via private vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Linden?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Am I correct? You've got the A48 with public transport and bus stops running along it, and you've got no footway from that entrance up onto the site. Is that correct? Well, why can't the 106 agreement stretch for continue the footway from where you're saying up to the A48 where there are bus stops, and then perhaps put another bus stop further along onto the site? So the people that haven't got cars, and if they come from England or wherever, because I suggest that the people that live in my estate work there, and they haven't got cars because they just walk to work, are they then going to go to the site on a bike in the middle of winter? And that brings in a second point. I know it's not part of this development, but what's going to happen with the site that's being relocated in England? Do you understand that? Sure. No?
Thank you. Oh. Yeah, I think so. So, in relation to the first point, regarding the Section 106 and the access, a Section 106 can only be asked effectively to make a scheme acceptable. So we felt that though that in order to make this scheme acceptable, we needed that financial contribution to put the footway in and to link into the existing infrastructure. At the moment, there hasn't been a design agreed. That will be down to the council's project team to come up with something which is acceptable, and using the funding by the applicant along with other funds for the specific active travel projects. So it will link up towards this point here, which will then provide a link all the way through. We can't start asking the applicant to do things over and above what would make this scheme acceptable. Like we can't, it would need to be for their benefit. So the Section 106 contribution can't ask for things that would impact other users on the site. Would provide enhancement for other users on the site, because it effectively wouldn't be fair, really, for this company to pay for a benefit which is not explicitly to them. So yeah, that's sort of the view on that. If anyone else wants to sort of chip in, and if I've got anything wrong there, or can provide any further comment.
So I just wanted to add on the second point. So you asked what was going to happen to the existing site. So that doesn't form part of the consideration for the application today, but just anecdotally, I've been speaking to SPTS representatives, and apparently they've got numerous inquiries from people who are aware that they're looking to relocate and asking what they want to do with their existing factory and premises. So I don't think that we need to worry about what the future holds for that site, but certainly that's not part of the consideration today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watkins, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was concerned about the parking issue. They're talking about in total 750 parking spaces. The thing is, though, it's on a 3-shift system, which they would be working, I would imagine. So that's about 200 and odd, people per shift. What I would like to see, I marked down footpath and bus stops. 2 questions in regards to that. Will there be some sort of lighting along that footpath? Because obviously, if we're talking shift patterns, then people are going to be walking in the dark. And obviously, it's very unnervy, especially if there's no lighting there. The other thing is, I am concerned in regards to public transport along the A48. It's not very good. It's very, very scarce, in fact, and considering we're talking about shift patterns, then we're not going to get people at 10 o'clock at night using public transport because it's not there. It has to be by car or motorcycle or cycle. And as it's not very well lit up, I can't see cyclists going along that way at 10 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter or even in the autumn. So I would like to see lighting there, and I would like possibly Newport City Council to talk to Newport Bus to support this type of industry in that area and possibly increase the buses to supply personnel to the factories. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. I can agree to making sure those conversations happen.
Okay, thank you.
What about the lighting? Can that be conditioned in with the footpath?
So with that, it will be part of the adopted highway, so we'll have conversations with our city services colleagues about making sure that that area is fit for use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? No? So, do we have a proposer for the So there's 3 proposals. We'll have Councillor Mogford. Thank you. And a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Jones, thank you. Right, can we have a vote for all those in favour of the proposal? Councillor Watkins, do you want to say yea or nay?
Yes, for the application.
Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Now move on to item number 2, which is application 211217, land south of the visitor centre transporter bridge, and this is to be presented by Gail Parkhouse.
Thank you, Chair. Just share my screen. Okay. Good morning, committee. Yeah, this is an application 21/12/17, and the site relates to a small section of the banks of the River Esk, hatched in blue here, and it's next to the transporter bridge. And it's an application for a replacement retaining wall, which is the current wall is currently failing in a number of places, and the wall is necessary to allow for the construction of the new visitor centre, which will sit behind the wall in this approximate location. The application is brought before Planning Committee because it is council-owned land. So just to give you an aerial view of the site, you can just about see the line of the existing wall, which runs where my cursor is going here. And then here, a view from the SDR, you can see the handrail, post and handrail across the top of the existing wall, transporter bridge here, and then a close-up view of the wall, which it currently exists. Looking in the opposite direction towards the transporter bridge, the land behind the retaining wall, and just noting this tree here. And then the current steps and ramps down onto the land which sits behind that retaining wall. This is a plan then of the existing wall, so you can see it in elevation view here, in plan view here, and then a 3D image here. And then this is the proposal then to, again, in elevation view, plan view, and in 3D view. So it's proposed to replace the wall with sheet piling, which would be pile-driven into the ground. The sheets would be installed one at a time, about 200 millimetres in front of the existing wall, and there would be a concrete capping above. Once the piles are completed, then the old wall would be removed, and the new wall would follow the existing contour of the ground, which is relatively flat, except for a small section here, which would be raised just to meet up with this existing retaining structure here. And then a similar post and rail fence would go across the top of the retaining wall. So the main considerations then have been the impact on protected sites and species, the landscape and visual impact, the heritage impact, any impacts on trees and impacts on general amenity. So looking first then at the impact on protected sites and species, which is basically the River Esk. The River Esk is a site of special scientific interest, or SSSI, and also a special area of conservation, so it has a European protection. And we are required under the habitats regulations to undertake a habitats regulations assessment. Under these and under that assessment, we must assess the adverse impacts, any adverse impacts on the River Esk. and this process is called an appropriate assessment, and you'll see a section in the report which details that assessment. So through that assessment, we've identified that noise and vibration from piling, construction activities, creating noise and disturbance, and any potential pollution could cause adverse impacts on fish species in the river and otter using the riverbanks if these activities aren't controlled. So a number of conditions are recommended, which have been agreed with Natural Resources Wales, who are the statutory consultee on appropriate assessments. And these conditions include a construction environmental management plan to be submitted, which includes details on matters such as pollution prevention, site management, biodiversity management, control of nuisances such as noise, vibration, dust, and light spill. And then also conditions requiring details of the method of piling and restriction on when those piling works can take place to avoid fish spawning and migration periods. So with the imposition of those conditions and their implementation, Natural Resources Wales have not raised any objection to the proposals. Looking then onto the visual and the heritage impact, while the River Usk is a special landscape area, and while the works would be relatively close to the listed transporter bridge, the works are relatively minor. It's a retaining wall which will replace an existing retaining wall, and so we consider the impacts to be relatively minimal. And we haven't received any objections in terms of the heritage or visual impact, and we're satisfied that the proposed works would not be harmful in this respect. I noted the tree earlier, so there is one tree which is close to the existing retaining wall and the proposed retaining wall, but the works would not directly affect that tree, and there are no proposals to remove it. The tree officer has no objection, and we are recommending a condition just to ensure that that tree is retained. And then finally, just on general amenity, the nearest residential properties are located well away from the site and on the other side of the SDR. So on this basis, we're satisfied that residential amenity and amenity in general would be protected. So just to sum up then, officers are satisfied with the proposed developments, and we are recommending that the application is granted with conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gail. There are no speakers on this motion. However, it is in the Pilgranley ward, and would Councillor Jenkins like to say anything? No? Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this? Councillor Evans?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. The Stephen Street flood development works opposite are obviously came through planning and were rejected last time. That's a sort of significant change to the flood flow of that area of the river. There's no flood consequences assessment with this application. There's inevitably going to be some change in levels, and I just wonder whether they need to be considered akin to each other, really, in terms of the sort of flooding effect. I mean, lots of that area of Pill, and further into Pill is due to flood. You know, if you look at the sort of 10-15, some of the other parts where I live, Lysop Village, just on the other side of the river, are protected at the moment by defences, but the way that the sort of Stephen Street modelling works sort of sends the water in a different direction, and I just wonder whether they should be being considered together as opposed to sort of separate applications without a flood consequences assessment.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, the wall at the moment is for structural stability of the land behind it. Like I said, it's to allow for the visitor centre to be built. It doesn't act as a flood defence at the moment. We have consulted with Natural Resources Wales. They've not requested that a flood consequences assessment is carried out. And as I said, the contour of the land is to be kept as it is at the moment.
Councillor Watkins?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Following on from that, Chair, perhaps the officer can ask, give me an answer. Why wasn't a flood consequence assessment made? Because it's in Zone 2, C2, and I'm concerned about that because I would imagine that every development, irrespective of what it is, should have a flood consequence assessment made. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, we've consulted with Natural Resources Wales. I mean, given the scale and the nature of the development, it doesn't really fall for that a flood consequences assessment to routinely be asked for. You know, there's no change in ground levels, so it doesn't really affect how flood water might behave. So there's no change in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mockford?
Thank you, Chair. If I understand well, you've said that this retaining wall is being put together to enable a visitor centre. Why is it not submitted as part of the visitor centre project? And what is the status of the planning consideration for the visitor centre project, please?
Thank you. As I understand it, they weren't aware that the existing wall was currently failing. So in the process of events, the retaining wall needs to go in first so that they can then start on the visitor centre. The visitor centre came to planning committee sometime last year, so that has a consent in place. So once they've got the retaining wall in place, then they can commence on construction with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to come back or have any further questions? Councillor Purdy?
You've said that the construction is through piling. I know the residents are a bit further away over the SDR road, but will the piling be time constrained because it does cause a noise pollution?
I mean, we are going to control when piling activity can take place in terms of the impact on the river. And as with all construction, we would expect, considerate construction practice. The construction environmental management plan will ask for construction hours. So we'll look at that to make sure that residential properties are protected as well.
Okay, thank you all. There's no further hands. So, could we have a proposer for this said works granted with conditions? Thank you, Councillor Drum. Second. Councillor Harvey, thank you. All those in favour? Councillor Watkins?
Yes, in favour.
Okay, thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, we now move on to item number 3. This is application 21-1235 for Avalon Station Road, Llanwern, and presented by Joanne Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, the site is the area hatched blue on the location plan here. Before I start with the other slides, just to confirm, we issued a late representation report on this yesterday, updating the details of the applicant. So the applicant is O. Davis, not the applicant that is stated in your agenda. Also to confirm that the application is before committee at the request of Councillor Kellaway. And his request was for the committee to assess the overall impact on the adjacent property and the street scene. Okay, the site is located within Llanwern Village. So you can see the aerial with the site outlined in red on the right here, and the corresponding ordnance survey on the left. and then a closer shot. So a couple of things to particularly note here from a site context and layout point of view. You'll see that it is a semi-detached property. It and its neighbour occupy a very elongated plot. So they have very wide frontages to the road, but limited depths. And the topography of the area is such that the land to the rear is quite elevated in comparison to the dwellings themselves. We'll see this from the photos that I'll show as part of the presentation. It also means that the properties as they stand have a very linear form. Again, very wide frontages, very limited depth, with very little scope to do your usual rear extensions, for example, that many occupiers would do. The primary amenity space for both these semis, and the site included, is to the side for obvious reasons. The land to the rear is pretty much unusable because of the topographical situation. To put it into a wider development perspective, the committee is probably aware that we've got a significant expansion development going on in the Llanwern area. So all this slide is really showing you is how the site that we're looking at, which we've marked with an arrow, relates to that wider development. Because the committee needs to understand that changes are taking place in the local environment and what those changes are. So Redrow is the developer of this large expansion area, and this is an extract from the agreed master plan to show you as a committee how that expansion is intended to look in close proximity to the site. So in short, there is no operational development. There's no houses proposed close to the application site. It's a large area that it will be retained for landscaping and drainage purposes. So this is showing you the existing semi. So we're just looking at Avalon here, and we've superimposed the existing measurements that you'll probably find most relevant to your considerations. So you'll see the form of the building in terms of that top floor plan is very modest. We have it, or as we understand it, it is a one-bedroom house, so very limited in terms of the floor space it provides. You'll see it's low level. It is single story. So it's only 2.7 metres to the eaves and 4.85 metres to the ridge. But we go back to that very wide frontage I spoke about. It's, almost 11 metres wide to the road. This is what the applicants have proposed. Now, of course, we can understand why they would want to extend because of the limited size of the existing property. So the proposal involves putting a first floor over the entirety of the original dwelling. So taking this up across the entire width. Again, we've included the measurements just so you can appreciate the difference. And also adding a single-storey extension onto the side again. So increasing the width at ground floor over and above what you already see. So this is significant in scale compared to what we currently have on site. So if I take you back again, 4.85 metres to ridge, for example, is existing, 7 metres proposed, 2.7 metres to the eaves, 5.1 proposed. So we're talking over 2 metres in terms of the difference in the height. In terms of the width, we're going from 10.89 metres as we measure it off the plan to 14.3 metres. Again, significant extension of the width. So overall, taken combined, significant increase in the massing of what is a semi-detached unit. These are the floor plans. So taking this from a one-bedroom, single-storey unit to a two-bedroom, two-storey unit. There's a couple of other works involved in the application and for which consent is sought. So over and above those extensions I just went through, this layout shows you the other works. So we've got some engineering operations going on. So if you recall, I mentioned the topographical situation. So we've got rising land to the rear in particular. So the applicant is proposing to excavate to make way for certainly their expansion of the ground floor area. And to do that, they need to construct a retaining wall. That retaining wall is going to be quite a significant operation in its own right. So it's up to 3.5 metres high, particularly at the rear of the property where the ground level is most noticeably different. Coming down to about 1 metre here on the front. So sorry, my cursor isn't really doing what I want it to do. But here, the retaining wall would be about 1 metre high. You can also see on this bottom proposed layout, the applicant proposes 2 parallel parking spaces to the carriageway. At the moment, historically, the property didn't have any parking. There has been some more recent works to the frontage, which you'll see on the photos I'm about to show, to try and create some parking. But this application is to formalise approval for 2 parallel spaces. This is a section showing you a little bit of how this would relate to the other semi in terms of the changes to Avalon, but also to acknowledge that over and above those heights I gave on the previous elevation drawings, this section shows us that the property is elevated in comparison to the road. So or in the case of Avalon, we're measuring it at about 0.6 metres higher than the carriageway. So the reason why I've put that in is really to acknowledge that we've said it's going to be 7 metres high on the elevation, but add another 0.6 to that in terms of when you're stood on the carriageway, the nearby road, it's going to appear as 7.6 metres high to the ridge. You'll see in your report that the application has attracted support from neighbouring residents and the Community Council, and some of those representations have noted the previous 2-storey nature of the cottages, and the applicant has provided us with this image which confirms that. The fact that the 2-storey is clear based on the fenestration detailing, but all I would point out to committee is this photograph also clearly shows the relationship with Rose Cottage, which is on the other side of the road and has its gable adjoining the carriageway. So if we look at the current situation, again, we can see Rose Cottage on the other side of the road and its gable and the existing properties. Now, to my mind, in looking at this, compared to this, even though the cottages were historically, by the looks of it, 2-storey, the height of the actual development is no different, or certainly not visibly different to how we see it today. So I can only imagine that modern day expectations in terms of floor to ceiling heights, etc., and some past renovation has taken it to single storey, whereas it was previously probably low height 2-storey development. Again, some other images just so you can get an idea of the context of the site. We're looking along Station Road here with the development site on the right-hand side and, as I say, the nearby property opposite. Again, a view taken. This is a recent photograph. So I mentioned that some changes had been done to the front of Avalon. You can see a wall has been removed, some scalpings have been placed, and we assume that is in relation to providing some sort of off-road parking. Again, another view of it. You can see clearly from the plans and the photographs that it is very modest in scale. We've set out probably best at paragraph 7.8 in your reports the assessment of officers in terms of what these changes do to the site and the property. So you'll see we say the scale and design of the proposal results in a structure of considerably increased bulk and massing to the detriment of the character and appearance of the existing property. It would also elongate the linear form of the property, which when combined with its shallow depth and the increased height would result in a development which has an awkwardly tall appearance. Officers consider that the upward extension and widening of the property combined with its elevated nature would result in a structure of considerable height in close proximity to the highway. And as a result, and given its setting opposite the gable end of Rose Cottage, officers consider that the development would result in a prominent and imposing structure to the detriment of the character and visual amenities of the street scene as a whole. We do have some history on the other site, which I'll go into when I do the next presentation. But we do know that whilst the pier have been altered in the past, you can see this one has seen some alterations on the side elevation, and the other semi has seen some other alterations, so they're not perfectly symmetrical as a pier. They do still retain some symmetry in their general form and scale, and this proposal would obviously significantly prejudice that. So some photos now that would help you perhaps put into context that topographical issue I mentioned. So you can see we've got rising land to the side, and a retaining wall is proposed here, reducing from 3.5 to 1 metre. And you can see the elevated nature of the land to the rear and the landscaping. Now, one of the reasons for refusal arises from an objection we have from our internal landscape consultees, who are concerned, having regard to the engineering operations I've described, that we have no information at all on how that will affect landscape. This is part of the village, but nevertheless, the landscape setting does contribute to its visual amenity. It is a pleasant characteristic of the street appearance, and we are entirely unclear on how the operational development will impact the landscaping you see in this photograph. The landscape officer is concerned that it could have potentially significant effects, but we've got no information at all on that. Okay, a view along showing that linear form. And again, a better photograph perhaps of that rising land, the landscape features, etc. And that's really just to show how it looked before that wall came out on the front. So you'll see we have an objection from highways. So another part of the development that I mentioned to you was the creation of those two parallel spaces on the front. Again, completely understand why the applicant would have a desire to create off-road parking. The property currently just doesn't have any. So the highways officer is concerned that the creation of the parallel spaces would have insufficient visibility in terms of particularly egress in those spaces. So the expansion of the property would increase the parking demand from 1 to 2 spaces. So the applicant is clearly trying to comply with the parking SPG in that respect. But the highways officer considers, and we agree, that we are going to create a highway hazard. So if you go back a second, so the spaces will go in this area here that will be levelled. as I say, and a retaining wall installed. There would be limited visibility, certainly insufficient to meet the required standards, looking in both directions. So we've got hedgerow and landscaping on this side. And if we look, I'm not sure if I've got a better photo of that, but if we look here, we've got a fence to the neighbouring semi, restricting visibility. So if you can imagine someone parking beyond the carriageway, potentially facing, as we're facing here, so the driver sat on the inside, they're not going to have much forward visibility. They'll be pulling out into an active carriageway because there's no footway, no verge. So we are concerned that that will raise a highway hazard. And one of the reasons for refusal is on that basis. Okay. We've mentioned several policies in terms of the reasons for refusal and the report itself. This is one key one here regarding general amenity that you may be aware of as a committee, because this one comes up a lot. So if you look at point 2, the proposed use and form of development will not be detrimental to the visual amenities of nearby occupiers or the character or appearance of the surrounding area. In this case, we object on that basis as officers. So GP6, again, quality of design, lots of criteria here. So if we take criteria 4, for example, the scale and form of development. New development should appropriately reflect the scale of adjacent townscape. Care should be taken to avoid overscale development. Again, I mean, there are other relevant factors here. I'm just picking out some examples. So officers object to this scheme. We recommend refusal. We've got numerous grounds for refusal that we're recommending. That's it from me, Chair, but happy to take questions as usual.
Okay, thank you. We have a public speaker supporting this. 3 minutes, yeah? 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Let you have Mr. Davis, 5 minutes to speak.
First and foremost, I just want to say thanks to the Chair and Committee for hearing us today. Also to the Planning Department for actually having a look at this application. It's been a bit of a difficult one. I'm not sure where our actual planning officer is today. I know that this application has been passed around a few times. There was a mistake initially. Our architect submitted the application in my neighbour's name. We amended, this was in December last year, we amended it in February. I don't think this has been picked up on until after I asked to speak at the committee, so I can understand that the planning authority might not have total confidence how these two schemes are going to work. But here we are. We haven't really had much contact from the local planning authority. I think in terms of landscaping, etc., with baskets, only after the officer actually produced their report have we had this information over. The only contact we've really had is a request for a bat survey. We had this done on both dwellings, came back okay. In terms of that landscaping, obviously, we'd be happy to work with, the planning authority in terms of conditions or whatever members here sort of request. I've lived in the village 22 years this August. My family have got the equestrian centre down the bottom, so I think I consider myself a villager now. So prior to actually submitting this application, I knocked the doors of all the neighbours, asked what their thoughts were, had a second copy of the previous two-storey picture of the two-storey dwellings that you can see there. I think it was featured in, Fred Hando did an article or a series in the Argus. The cottage opposite Rose Cottage has actually got it on his wall in his living room. He said, there it is, it'd be great to put it back to that. In terms of the design, architect's instructions were clear. Here's a photo. Get it as close as you can to that as possible. Obviously, the side extension is on there. It provides provision for the stairs behind where the current bathroom is. The house itself is only 35 square metres now. It's very dilapidated. I think I've got more condensation on the windows, the steel windows, than I have actually in the kettle in the morning. But what we've gone for is a modest design, a slate pitched roof, white rendered finish, sort of trying to keep the windows looking as they were on the original design. I think in terms of street scene, a little bit too much weight might have been put on the design itself. You know, the village hall opposite, to put into perspective, these cottages date back to, I believe, around 1760. So actually, you know, even the village hall opposite, which is about 100 years old, would have actually had an overbearing impact on this and Rose Cottage opposite when it was built. So I think, you know, having all the neighbours' views and letters of support they've actually put in with this application, that I think too much weight has been put on that. In terms of the behind us, I'm going to try and keep this quick, obviously, because I'm running out of time here, but in terms of behind us, yes, we've only got the attenuation lakes coming down behind us, but we've got the new spine road for the village. You know, all we hear all day is, you know, 25-ton excavators, bulldozers operating. You know, we've got a 100-ton crane in. We've got the main, although it's below ground, we've got the main pumping and sewage station actually behind our houses. You know, it's necessary for Redrow, but, you know, it is difficult when you've got a £500 million development behind us, and then as villagers, we've got a genuine need to try and do this, and it is quite frustrating. Just quickly on the parking, I took the parking. The wall on the one side wasn't very good when we bought the property. The other side wasn't too bad. But we took the wall down, put this provision in. We've been parking 2 cars on the road, on the drive, for 18 months now. It's worked well. Neighbours are really happy with it, prefer it like that. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the village, but if you drive through, it's quite narrow past the village hall, the institute there. People park outside, taxis drop off. And what I've noticed is since we've actually taken the wall down, put the parking there, you seem to get a lot of people stood on the drive. And firstly, I was sort of, you know, why would they be stood there? But it's sort of a natural point for people to sort of come off the road. You know, the default position here is if we don't get this, if myself and my partner don't get this, it's not going to be possible for Lee because they'd have to be developed in tandem. And you're still going to have 2 cars parked either on the drive, or if that's not allowed, they're going to be parked on the road. So there's not really much change. Sorry? Yes, in summary, if there's any doubts at all, please come out and visit the site. Please, you know, any doubts at all, please come and see it. And any conditions that, you know, members or, you know, planning want in terms of development, you know, we'll be happy to comply with. But it's something we need, especially my neighbour here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, do I ask? We do have another speaker first, if you, okay. Okay, thank you for that. The ward member for this ward is Councillor Callaway, but he can't make it today, so he's asked Councillor Reach to speak on his behalf.
Thank you, Chair. This is a statement from Councillor Callaway. He said, "Can I please thank the committee for the opportunity for my statement to be read to them, so I have another pre-made appointment and sadly cannot be there in person. I referred to both applications and confirm my full support for the applications as the elected member for the Llanwern ward and based on the views of the residents of Llanwern village. Members of the committee will note that the applications have received nothing but support from residents in the village and see the development positive and as sensible applications and make use of the scope of the existing properties for 2 families who have lived in Llanwern village for many years. If I'm also able to remind members, Station Road sits below the Cot Hill development of Great Milton, which when complete will add 1,100 homes, a school and shopping to the community, and in the view of residents of Llanwern, it is the 1,100 houses that will dwarf both Avalon and Jasminium. And I can't help agreeing, as 1,100 homes will simply be overbearing on the whole of what was a small rural village. The applications before you are made by 2 local families, not the huge businesses like Redrow, who simply wish to make a profit. The applications will allow the 2 families to live in the village they have spent much of their life and add to the community fabric of a village. Regarding the reasons for refusal, I do appreciate all the work officers have done on these applications. Regarding parking, currently any number of cars can park on Station Road, which has no pavement along this stretch. By creating parking spaces, the applicants are making the road safer and improving vision and improving pedestrian access. In short, the default situation is increased parking on the road and a danger to pedestrians. Vision can further be improved by restricting height and length of foliage adjacent to the property, and any loss of hedging and amenity could be mitigated with a replanting regime conditioned at planning. Historically, the properties were 2 stories, and having looked at the original black and white image, it really reinforces the view of residents of the village that the application restores the natural feeling of the area, without any overbearing impact on the existing institute, and residents who have lived in the village for generations believe the application not to be detrimental. I cannot help wondering why the other reasons for refusal, i.e. calculations for the Gabayan basket wall, provision of hedgerow information, mitigation, could not be conditioned prior to approval, which seems to happen with the bigger multinational developers such as Redrow. Yet when it comes to an individual application, little appears to be done to support the local resident. Some members of the committee may be familiar to the area in question and understand the feelings of residents, but it may help other members of the committee to have a site visit to better understand that officers may have given too much weight to some of their reasonings. Thank you again for taking time to listen to my representations on behalf of residents of Llanwern. Councillor Martin Kellaway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. Councillor Mockford.
Thank you, Chair. Some applications that come to us are very clear-cut, and this one isn't. I would like to propose a site visit. I think we need to understand, as a committee, some of the subjective points that have been put forward by planning. There are subjective issues here, and the words used created that feeling. That, so I would propose a site visit as the next step.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can Councillor Mogford please confirm again the reasons for the site visit?
The reasons for the site visit are because, to my mind, the two-dimensional pictures that we've seen and the subjective nature of this application in terms of whether something is overbearing, what the risks are, to my mind, is something we have to look at clearly rather than just fall down on one side or the other. This is a clear-cut case to me for getting a feel, for understanding how the properties sit today and what the topology looks like and other issues. I don't feel comfortable making a decision based on, it's in the balance to me. I want to see for myself the effects of what this property might bring or take away from the village. And maybe I'm not the only one who wants the site visit.
Councillor Linton.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify? Just waiting for Councillor Mogford to turn his mic off. So just to clarify, you feel that you haven't had enough information and context presented to you this morning, and you'd like to go and visit the site to see the proposal in the context of the actual site. I'm just clarifying that point.
Previously, I've been on site visits where it hasn't really been made clear by the photographs and some of the subjective language that's been used. You know, I think I heard figures of 2 meters extra height, etc., etc. Well, you know, there's people around here that are 2 meters tall. It's not a huge amount of height. I would feel much happier, and I was doing a better job on behalf of the committee when voting, that I had a better feel for the impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a reasonable request for the minutes.
Okay.
Just to confirm then, this will be minuted?
First, Okay, thank you. Sorry, I am new, as you know. Okay, so is there anybody else at the committee would like to second that we have a site visit? Is there anybody else in the committee, before we go on to any questions, would like to propose that we have or second we have a site visit?
Could I ask a question?
There is hand up behind you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would propose a second that because, believe it or not, I'm a Ringland lad. It was my paper around Lambourne. I know the village well. And I've been over there with a new development, and the impact it's having on the village and the people living there, respectfully, it's nice for the local families to want to develop properties over there, to stay in there and make it sustainable. So visually, I would like to go and visit this property, see it in context to the surrounding area, and while we visit this area, we can also see the Red Road development coming across, which is a major impact onto the village. But on this plan application, I think it's vital that we do go and visually see the situation and take it all on board ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, it's okay.
So does anybody else have any further comments before we take a vote on this issue? Malcolm?
Chair, yeah, I'm very familiar with the village myself as well, because I used to play golf down Lambourne and visit the Milton pub. I know the area very well. I know the two cottages. We've got to get some context behind. I'm not against a site visit. If members want to take a site visit, they can vote for a site visit, but based on the context of the reason for the site visit, we've got to look at the planning guidelines and the guidance on this application. And this one application is for the one property, not the two combined. Now, if you've got a single-storey cottage and then you're having a two-storey, which this application is for, and symmetrically and aesthetically looking at that, it doesn't apply with the guidance. So we've got to bear that in mind whilst you're visiting the site. I don't know why they've got one single application and it's like a neighbour next door who possibly wants to do the same. I just don't see why you've got one and then the other one. Just based on one application, why didn't they combine the two and speak to officers, get further guidance? I can see the old cottage, 100 and odd years old. They did have, I'm a surveyor, and I know that they had very low headrooms, and the room above had a very shallow stair going up. Perhaps you could speak to officers and work together to combine in. It could work with a room and a roof situation, which would be aesthetically pleasing for the village and everybody else.
Okay, so I just want to make Malcolm, sure. Are you speaking in favour of a site visit?
Well, if other members are in favour of a site visit, yeah, but I just wanted to give the context why they're going to be visiting the site, and based on this one application alone, do we need the site visit or?
Councillor Owls.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I'm relatively new to the Planning Committee, but some observations on the report. It just appears that we haven't, officers haven't approached it with an open mind. I take the point from my colleague about the subjective language of the report. It's just heavily sort of in favour of looking for reasons to sort of bat it away instead of trying to work with the sort of applicant to come to a sensible resolution. The applicant sort of said it's been passed from pillar to post in terms of sort of planning officers and discussions, and it seems to me there's a bit more work to do in sort of conversations between officers and the applicant to get the best use of this land. My own view, knowing the area well, is that actually these cottages are out of context. They're probably not cottages now. They're out of context with the buildings that are around them anyway, because they've been dropped in height and everything is different. There's lots of stuff in stone. There is issues there, and actually the sort of parking area will improve by having that bit of off-road parking, particularly with the traffic light situation as it is now. It's very difficult to get past if people park on the road, and if the applicants were parked on the road will be blocked at times. So for me, I think there's a bit more work to do for planning officers and the applicant to go back and have some sensible applications, conversations and resubmit.
Okay. Okay. Joanne, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, on the points made by the speaker and the members in relation to possibly more how the application has been dealt with, the applicant has had 2 officers, mainly because the first case officer left the authority. That's a staffing issue that we've got ongoing at the moment, and I appreciate it's unsettling for applicants when they have that change of officer, but unfortunately there's nothing we can do about that. In relation to information relating to landscape, the structural calculations, it's a little bit of damned if we do and damned if we don't as officers. So basically there was no pre-application dialogue on this. So where we've got constrained sites that are subject to significant constraints or potential concerns, we would always encourage that. It's not obligatory, it's something we would encourage. Notwithstanding, the applicant rightly confirms they submitted an ecology statement. These things cost money, as members will appreciate. So we only ask for additional information where we think it's reasonable to do so. Now, in this particular application, we had significant concerns that I hopefully expressed in the presentation and via the report regarding the design and scale. So we did feel there was a need for extra information in relation to landscaping and the Gabion retainers, but to continually ask for the applicant to spend money on that information, knowing that there were very significant design and scale concerns our end, would have potentially been seen as unfair, i.e. we've spent all this money, we've taken all this time, and you've still refused it. The applicant may feel differently in that respect, but that's how we've got to take a reasonable approach. So I would tend to agree with members. If we were minded to support the application as officers, we were happy with the design, we were happy with the scale, we would have asked for the landscape details and we would have asked for the structural details, either up front or by condition. But we can't condition it because we're refusing it, and we didn't want to ask for it and put the applicant at unnecessary expense. I just thought that was worth explaining, Chair. Thank you.
So we're going to go to the vote now for a site visit. For those in favour of a site visit, please show hands. So that's unanimous.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, it has to be an all-member site visit. So we will need to be quorate at that site visit for a decision to be made. So just for your awareness, we'll fix a date for that. But it is a requirement that people can attend where possible, please.
Councillor Mockford.
Sorry, just a point, just understanding on site visits, because I've been off planning for a while. Will we be picked up or will we make our own way there?
Usually there's some arrangements are made with the site visits. But we haven't done one for quite a while, if we obviously with COVID, so we'll be in contact about that.
Thank you.
I'll speak with the officers after and we'll let the members know.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, the decision on this application will now be made after we've done the site visit. Okay, thank you. I suspect the next one's going to be very much the same, I think. But so we're now going to item number 4, Station Road again, Lamwern, and again, Joanne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Because of the relationship of this application to the last one, I'll be as quick as I can running through this. But this is for the other semi. So it's called Jasminium. The same reasons it's before committee. That's at the request of Councillor Kellaway. Slightly different in terms of the description of development, though, that members need to note. Okay, so we know where it is now, and there is the site outlined in red. So again, a similar property, a bit larger this one in footprint compared to the last one, but in terms of the height, very similar or identical, and it's got an increased road frontage compared to Avalon. This property has some noticeable alterations, including the porch you can see on the left-hand side, which is due to be demolished. And again, similar to the last one we saw in terms of increasing the height, you can see what officers mean about that very limited depth and the very tall appearance of the resulting building. These gables will be visible in the street scene. Okay, so in addition to the first floor extension and side extension on this one, the current property, as you'll see from the top layout, has an existing garage which is not actually used as a garage. It's used as habitable space. That's going to be demolished to be replaced by some open-air parking and a turn-in facility within the applicant's garden. So the access already exists, that vehicular access off Station Road. The applicant proposes to widen it and, as I say, provide that turn-in facility which isn't currently provided. The Highways Officer also objects to these works on this application, but we don't agree on this one. The vehicular access exists, and at the moment it has very poor visibility. The widening of the access will improve the situation in that respect, and the turn-in facility will improve the come-ins and go-ins and general safety of that access compared to existing. So we have disagreed with the Highway Officer on this one. Okay, this section, existing and proposed, you can see on the left there where the garage goes in the proposed section. And what we've done here is something similar to what we've done in your actual agenda reports, is just put them together. Now, this is something I didn't cover in the first representation, but Councillor Linton has talked about this in his remarks. So we've got two applications. They're two separate applications, two separate applicants, okay, and they each need to be considered on their own merits. We cannot make one complete the development once the other one's completed the development. We can't make them happen together. Okay, so the members have to understand that they are considering them in their own right and on their own merits. So we've put it together there in terms of what it would look like if they did both complete the development, but we can't guarantee it and we can't make people complete development. Life often gets in the way, costs, etc. People change their minds. It could be anything. Okay. This is Jasminium then. You'll see that this is just a wider building with that alteration on the front. The fence is a more recent addition. I should say that's subject to separate enforcement issues that are ongoing. Okay, and there's a view of that garage that is going to be demolished, and the area the applicant uses as the garden and the primary outdoor amenity space. So again, those context photos for you. You can see the works to the rear on that one actually in relation to the Redrow development that has been mentioned. So of relevance on this one is some site history. We've set it out in your agendas. There's quite a lot of site history on the Jasminium application, so It's been replicated on this slide. So there has been a consistent attempt by the applicant on this one to acquire planning approval to extend the building, all of which have been refused. For similar reasons and based on similar policies to those we've been through today. This is the most recent one, and you'll see the side extension that was proposed and refused by the local planning authority. The applicant did appeal that decision, as disagreed with the outcome that we'd come to, but the planning inspector agreed with officers, agreed that that extension is unacceptable, and the bottom section of this slide is actually an extract from the appeal decision. So, the inspector confirms the limited depth of the plot means that the proposed two-storey extension would be prominent. We know that, we've seen that from what has been presented. The character of the area is defined by a mixture of dwellings of different styles. However, this does not justify the adverse effect of the proposal on the modest bungalow. It would be bulky and unsympathetic to the modest property. This, obviously, compared to what's proposed now, again, it's subjective, but there are similarities, and this one has been tested at appeal. The policies again, but I won't go through those again, Chair, because we've done them. That's it. Officers recommend refusal. The primary reason on this one is most definitely design and scale. As I say, the highway officer's objection is not agreed with, and so does not form a reason for refusal on this one. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joanne. We'll now go on to the public speakers. So, Mr. McCarthy, 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Lee McCarthy. I would like to thank the Chair and Committee for allowing me to speak today. I've lived in the village of Llanwern for over 3 years. We moved with our newborn girl to a small two-bedroom detached bungalow. Unexpectedly, shortly after, followed by our baby boy, which put a huge strain on our living space with both boy and girl currently sharing a room. My family are very settled in the village and feel part of the community, and I'm reluctant to have to move. As you can see, we have submitted a number of applications to extend the property to enable us to create an additional bedroom for both boy and girl and a kitchen so that we can enjoy a family meal. The primary reason previous applications have been rejected are due to the design being unsympathetic to my neighbour here, Oliver. Both properties in their current state cannot provide a modest family home, which in turn is affecting our living conditions, and not providing adequate space we both urgently need. I was approached by a local resident who was an historian in the village who gave us a photo of the property as a two-storey semi-detached cottage many years ago. Myself and Oliver both liked the design and character of this historic site and instructed the architect to design a look and mirror the simple scale and detailing of the historic cottages previously. We took time to consult with our local neighbours prior to making our application, who are in support of restoring the dwellings back to the original look. We feel too much weight has been put on design. We note the officer's report confirms dwellings surrounding the property of mixed architecture, style, and I would like to highlight the fact the huge housing development progressed on the other side of my fence. Since my most recent application, December 2021, the only contact received in the last 6 months was a BAT survey, which has been carried out and submitted to local authority, with council ecologists confirming the report addresses outstanding issues. Reference landscaping comments, these were produced after the officer's report. We are happy to comply with any conditions. We are both willing to enter legal agreement and commit neither scheme can be implemented independently and accept development to work in tandem. We believe our development will create a more environmentally friendly and more sustainable living built to the latest regulations. We are desperate not to have to move from our neighbours and friends we have made in the village. Your decision today will have a huge impact on our futures. Our young family is growing fast. My girl is now 3 and boy 18 months, and it's desperate habitable living space is provided. I beg members to grant conditional planning consent. I'd like to again thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reeks was going to speak on this again, but I think he spoke on that, now on both of these, when he read the letter out just now, because he's now left. So, okay, do we have any questions? Councillor Mogford.
This is a question, but I'll turn it into a question somewhere along the line. It seems sad that the gentleman would have to keep submitting and getting refused, and that there's not a tighter working cooperation, because whichever way you look at it, there is scope for some improvement to these properties that would satisfy both parties. I don't know what that is, but there must be a meeting of minds that would solve this problem. And then thereby it wouldn't be with us, which would perhaps be a good thing. I mean, this has been brought to committee by the local councillor, let's not forget that, for this type of discussion to take place and for different minds to look at the problem. So that's not really a question, it's an observation, and I don't know how to turn it into a question.
Okay. George, want to reply to that?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. I think we'd have to be rather hard not to have some sympathy to the applicant's circumstances in that respect. I suppose from officers' point of view, and the reason why I put those slides up about policy is that all our decisions must be in accordance with policy, adopted planning policy, unless there are material considerations that indicate otherwise. That is actually the law. But, you know, that aside, we did at paragraph 7.14 of the reports in your agenda, we have said, you know, the properties clearly need some updating and some modernisation, I suspect, internally. And I'll be amazed if there is no solution possible. The difficulty we have is, and I mentioned this before, is that the pre-application process is not an obligatory process. Okay, the onus is on the developer to come to us and ask us for that pre-application advice. We can't make them do it. And once we're in the application process, it's difficult, once you've got quite fundamental objections, to change that through the application process, because we're limited by time and resource. So that pre-application process would be perhaps, and I'm putting it out as a suggestion myself, the best way, depending on the outcome of this process, to explore alternative options, perhaps.
If I can just come back on that, Chair. I'm not allowed to ask questions of the members of the public, but a rhetorical question would be, were they aware that there is a pre-application process? Was this made, was this pointed out to them at any point, or was it too late by the time they applied?
I can't, Avalon has only been subject to one recent application. But of course, as the gentleman has said on Jasminium, he's probably quite familiar with our processes now, because he's had multiple applications that unfortunately have been refused and been through an appeal process. So, you know, our pre-application processes are quite well known. They're on the website, etc. And whilst I can't categorically say that I personally have told the applicant, I'll be amazed if it hasn't come up. That's probably as much as I can say. Sorry, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree with Councillor Mogford and officers as well, and I do sympathise with the applicants. However, members got to remember on this planning committee, we've got to stick by the rules of the game and planning guidelines and everything else. It's gone out, the previous applications have been refused on the basis what officers first refused on, and that was upheld. Nothing seems to have changed at present with this application from previous applications. And I think, and I would agree, that it could be overcome. Anything can be overcome, but it needs to come from the applicants to speak to officers and give them guidance. It looks like you've gone for full application here for planning process, whereas it might have been better putting an initial application in, speaking to the officers to see what they recommend, and you wouldn't have had to spend all the other money going with architects and the like, going over old ground. I know I'm going to say next, can we have another site visit? But obviously the two will be into one. But I would recommend that the applicants rethink their design and speak and converse with officers and get the help to get you over the line with this. Okay? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Sorry, you're not allowed to speak again, I'm sorry. Are there any other questions? Councillor Watkins, you... No? Okay. So the... Sorry, Councillor...
Although we've agreed to have a site visit for Avalon and we've been told that we can't consider them together, one can't happen without the other, so surely they must be considered. They've said that they will be willing to have a legally binding document drawn up, that one won't go without the other. How do we get through that?
Okay then.
So just a suggestion, committee. If you've requested a site visit for the property next door, would it be appropriate for you to suggest a site visit for this property so you can see both applications in context?
Councillor Margaret? Okay, and we have a seconder. Okay, so I think that's pretty straightforward then, that this is again, decision is put on hold until we have a joint site visit, and then we need to vote first. Sorry? They need to vote. Yeah, and then we can make a decision then. But could we have a vote, please, on the site visit? Show of hands. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Sal. If we can go on to item number 5 then, which is application 210193. Joanne, you again.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. What I'll probably do is present the next 2 items as one, but the committee will have to make individual decisions on each. They are for the same property. One is a planning application and one is a listed building consent application. So it's logical to combine the presentation into one in that respect. The reason this item is at committee is because the applicant is an elected member. Okay, so it's for a dwelling within the Cullion Conservation Area that also happens to be Grade 2 listed. So there is the scope of both the applications at the top of that slide. So you can see they're more or less identical. It's just a case that one is a different type of application because the building is listed. These are the plans as it exists at present. So we're focusing in on the rear elevation because that is where all the works are happening that we're concerned with. And the works, again, just to take it back, it's for the construction of a single-storey rear extension and replacement of some steps to the garden area, movement of a retaining wall, and replacement of kitchen door windows and window lintels and dormer window cladding. So as you can imagine, a lot of that work wouldn't ordinarily require consent. It does because the building is listed. So the building has seen some unsympathetic changes over the years, and the applicant's intention is actually to remedy that. Sorry, my cursor's on a bit of a delay. So where my cursor is now is where we have a current brick-out building. It's a more recent addition, quite old in itself, but nevertheless more recent than the property, that the applicant proposes to demolish with an associated canopy and put in its place this quite modern glazed extension, single-storey. It has no impact on the neighbours at all because the applicant's garden is actually submerged in relation to the neighbours. And the neighbours themselves have rear extensions. So the entire glazed nature of the extension will allow the retention of the stonework walls, the original stonework walls, to retain or maintain visibility. And the conservation officer is very happy with the design. It's taken that modern approach, so it doesn't jar with the listed building in that respect, and it's a very modest scale. The applicant's proposing to replace the windows with hardwood, the rear kitchen door with hardwood, and to replace some softwood cladding on the dormers with more traditional and acceptable materials. As I say, there's some minor works in the garden also proposed, but they're of no concern to officers at all. Overall, the development is acceptable. So some closer images of the proposed windows and their design. As I say, no objections at all to any of the works. This is what it currently looks like. So you can see the canopy on the left that is to go and be replaced with the extension. And you can see that the windows at the moment are softwood. And we've got some what would have been oak lintels that have at some point in the past been replaced with concrete. And the applicant proposes to put those back. So, all in all, a generally positive development with no adverse effects. Okay, that's the brick. That's the brick outbuilding that will be demolished, and the canopy will go. So officers are recommending in both cases that the listed building consent and the plan application be granted with conditions. In the case of the listed building application, that has to be referred to CADU before we can issue a notice on that. That's it from me, Chair. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no speakers, so do you have any questions? No? Councillor Watkins?
No questions really, just to apologise for the last application. For some reason my internet dropped out. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. You were missed, I must say. Okay. Okay then, so then, sorry. Okay then, can we have somebody propose 210193, please. Okay, and a seconder. Okay. All those in favour?
So that's to go for officer's recommendation,
Yes. And that's to go for the officer's recommendation. Yeah. Thank you. Any against? No. That's all in favour. And then item number 6, 220243, officer's recommendation, grant with conditions. Proposer, please. Yeah. Okay. Any one of you, thanks. Councillor Moss for second. Councillor Ewells. All those in favour, please show hands. Any against? That's all carried unanimously. Thank you. So the next one is item number 7, and this is 220319, and this is presented by Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, a canopy at a school application presented to committee because it is council-owned land. Very straightforward in all respects. It's at Mono School. A canopy, well, the canopy looks like a canopy. There's the measurements. This isn't the actual canopy, just an idea of what it would look like. That is the site, bottom right, that's where it'll go. And a longer range view. One of the issues we had on this one was the tree. Because on council-owned land, trees are effectively TPO'd. They are protected, and it's a very nice tree. So we wouldn't want the development to prejudice that in any way. So the tree officer has made comment and is happy with the details that have been provided. So we as officers certainly have no objection. Canopies now are part and parcel of the school environment. So there is some summary comments there referencing the oak tree, but not much more really for me to say on that, Chair, other than we recommend it be granted subject to conditions.
Okay, thank you for the report. Any questions? No? Can we have a proposer then, please, for the officer's recommendations? Councillor Linton, and the seconder, Councillor Perkins. All those in favour? Thank you. That's passed unanimously. Just 1 second now. Also, for noting on the last one, on the agenda, it did say, on the list it says Bettis, but on this agenda it does say Beechwood for it's just for noting. I don't think it. I think it was just a typo for the canopy. I pointed it out. Okay. Sorry, not on the list. The next one will be for the next one on the list is a full application for 220324, and the presenting officer is who presented? Capurlin? Steve.
Sorry everyone, struggling with the technology. Okay, this application is relates to 108 Caipwchan Road, which is in the Gare, and it's a semi-detached residential property. The application is seeking to provide a loft conversion, a hipped gable roof extension on the side, and a rear dormer. And the application is being reported to Planning Committee as a neighbour is an elected member. And the neighbour lives in the property to the south of the application property. So in front of you, here are the elevation drawings. On the top row are the existing elevations, and then in the bottom row are the proposed. So the left-hand side, you can see the front of the property, and you can see the proposal to to create a gable where there's currently a hip. And then the middle column shows the side. So you can see that there's going to be a window in the side elevation of the gable, which would serve the stairwell that leads up into the loft. And then on the right-hand side are the rear elevations. And you can see on the rear elevation there the proposed dormer, which is like a flat roof dormer on the back. And that's the floor layout of the loft conversion, which is going to provide a bedroom. So I'll just run through some photographs. So this is the front of the property. And what you'll notice from this photograph is that the neighbour to the right-hand side has a gable created, albeit it's set slightly off from the eaves. And on the other side as well, there's a property which is slightly higher up than the application property, and that's also had a gable constructed. And this shows the property from the rear. And you can see the property to the north there, relative to the application property. And then this photograph is taken again from the road, but slightly sort of further to the south. So that gives you a vantage of the dormer or gable that's been constructed on the property to the south. And just for information, there's another property in the road, number 70, which is probably about 60 or 70 yards down the road to the south. Number 70 has had a gable constructed, which is flush with the side elevation. so similar with what is proposed as part of this application. So in terms of visual impact, firstly, so both neighbouring properties have had similar type extensions constructed to the roof, albeit set back slightly from the eaves, whereas the proposed is going to be flush. The hip to gable would, to some extent, improve the symmetry of the semi-detached pair, the symmetry has been damaged by the property to the south. So it would, to some extent, reinstate the symmetry, although not entirely. Supplementary planning guidance states that dormers should be set down by 50 centimetres from the ridge and set back by 50 centimetres from the eaves. In this case, the dormer isn't strictly SPG compliant, because whilst it is set up from the eaves, it is pretty much flush with the ridge of the roof, so it has been set down from the ridge. However, it has been set in from the sides to some extent, and it's sited on the rear elevation. So the dormer extension is not going to be highly visible in the area. To the rear of this property, there are allotments, so it's not going to be visible really in the street scene or from locality. So on balance, we consider that the proposed roof extensions are acceptable on visual amenity grounds. The other issue is residential amenity. Now, in terms of, obviously, the land to the rear, it's allotments, there's no adverse impact in that direction. In terms of impact on the property to the south, quite limited impact there. I think the only impact is obviously they'd have sight of the rear dormer. And we don't think that that dormer would cause an overbearing impact. And it wouldn't alter privacy levels, because obviously there's currently first floor windows that look out towards the rear garden in any case. So we don't think that that changes the situation for that property. In terms of the impact on the property to the north, number 110, that would obviously be affected by the hip to cable extension. Now we've got tests so that in this case you can see, I'm not sure if I can get my cursor up. Here we go. There's a window there. That window there serves a habitable room. It's sort of a kitchen diner type room. And so what we have to do is we have to do a 45-degree splay test, and if that splay is interrupted, then we might consider that the proposal would cause an unacceptable impact in terms of natural light. And that test has been carried out, and you can see that it does marginally clip. So it marginally fails the 45-degree test. Obviously, we've got to consider, okay, does that actually cause demonstrable harm? This is the window, the concerned, and you can see that the hip would be here. Obviously, this property is set higher. On balance, we don't think that the impact would be unacceptable in terms of loss of light. It's obviously positioned so high up, sort of obviously above the sill of the window to some extent. So it's not coming closer, it's not sort of encroaching towards this window and causing that sort of overbearing feel. It's very much sort of up towards the higher end of the window. I think on balance it would be difficult for us to resist a refusal on these grounds. Just to make the point as well that no comments have been received from neighbours, so neither neighbours has objected to the application. And one final point to make as well is that we have to take account of what we call a fallback situation. So if this window here, as proposed, was obscure glazed and non-opening, then the entire scheme would be permitted development. It wouldn't need planning permission. The only reason any of it needs consent is because of this window is not obscure glazed and it's not non-opening. So in terms of, you've got to have that fallback. In terms of, does this window cause loss of privacy? It serves, and I'll show you, a stairwell. So it's not sort of the habitable room part of this loft conversion. So we don't think that causes unacceptable privacy issues. So we're recommending plan permission be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mogford.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. This was referred to the committee by a councillor who was a neighbour. Did I hear right?
No, under the delegated power protocol, one of the criteria that an application has to go to committee is if an elected member is a neighbour to an application site. In this case, there's a councillor that lives right next door to the property, so it has to come to committee for that simple reason.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask on the last point again, with the window on the staircase, is clear glass is being asked for? If there was an objection, that could easily be remedied by having obscure glass, perhaps? So I know you're recommending there's no need for it, but to be fair, it's a simple option if somebody did complain. Is that what we're saying anyway?
Yeah, if they were to sort of propose that that was to be obscure glaze and non-opening, then it wouldn't need plan permission. They could just withdraw the application and build it. For us to put a condition on to require that, it's got to be reasonable. There's got to be a reason for that. And in this case, because it's just serving a stairwell where there's just passing traffic, as it were, people sort of walking up and down the stairs rather than being in a room, we don't think it's reasonable to impose that condition in this case.
So if I just ask a second question to that, please. So is the window on the landing where you come up the stairs and where we're on the platform at the top, or is it actually on the stairway coming up?
I can bring that back up for you if you want. Hold on. Hopefully, yeah. Go with me. There you go. So you can see it's right on the stairwell. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's just that sometimes when you get to the top, people stand and they can look out, but I understand where it is, so that's great. Thanks for the information.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? So do we have a proposer for the officer's recommendations, please? Councillor Jones, yes. Seconder, Councillor Mogford. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Yeah. I knew he agreed he'd been spoken otherwise. Sorry, there's one item left, unless you want to go now. Okay, you can go if you need to. Okay, so the last one is item number 8, or it might be 9 actually, but item number 9, which is 220408. And Gail to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application 220408 relates to the vaults below the market. So in this area, Hatch Blue. And the application is brought before a planning committee because the council has an ownership interest in the building. You will have seen a late representation on this application as well, which I'll touch on in a little while. So the application is for a change of use of the vaults, which are currently used as storage, which is B8 use, to a mix of A1, A3, B1, D1 and D2. And then also some very limited external alterations on the Griffin Street elevation. Just to explain what all those uses actually mean. So A1 is shops and retail. A3 is food and drink. B1 is offices. D1 is non-residential institutions, so things such as a creche, education clinics, exhibition space. And then D2 is leisure, so things such as concerts, bingo, cinema, that sort of thing. So just to give you some photos then internally of what these vaults look like. So this photo here on the left is the entrance from the ground floor of the market, so going down into the vaults. And then this is the space within the vaults itself. And then further along the vaults. So basically it's a series of rooms off a central corridor. And then this photo then to the right would be one of the rooms on the southern side of the corridor. So some of them have a window onto the kind of the street level of Griffin Street. And it's proposed to retain these windows where they exist, refurbish them, and with those grilles in place. This is a floor plan which you probably won't be able to read particularly well. I'll try and zoom in a little bit. Just showing kind of the layout of those rooms either side of the corridor. They've sort of set out here, there's a bar here, this is an experience room, some lifestyle rooms. You know, the end use isn't prescriptive. You know, they're seeking flexibility for those range of uses. And it's worth noting that those range of uses currently exist in the market already. And we recently approved those range of uses on the mezzanine floor. And it's about creating greater flexibility for the market offer, and also quite a good opportunity to open up what is quite a unique space to the public. This slide is taken internally. I should mention that there's a corresponding application to this, the listed building consent application, which looks at the internal work. And work is ongoing with that application. So some of the detail in here is relevant to the listed building consent. We're considering right now is just the change of use and those minor external alterations. Those external alterations then, on this plan, again, it's quite small, just confined to refurbishing these openings at street level on Griffin Street. So there's grills, there's louvers in here, so it's about refurbishing those. There's also a roller shutter here, and then also a really small gas flue pipe to go in here. So then, just looking at the main considerations then, so we've looked at the impact on local amenity, any highway impacts, any impacts on heritage, because obviously it's a listed building, and flood risk. So in terms of local amenity, there are some existing residential uses on the upper floors of buildings along High Street and Griffin Street. However, the market is existing. It's in the city centre, where there are a mix of uses, including those which are being applied for, and have been granted elsewhere within the market building. And there's also a nighttime economy around the market area with a number of late night food and drink outlets. So we're satisfied because the vaults are wholly within the market building, and there's already a range of uses within the market and in the surrounding area, including that nighttime economy. And then we're satisfied that the proposal would not cause any additional harm to neighbouring amenity. In terms of highways, it's a city centre location. The parking standards do not require any non-operational parking provision, and servicing can take place in the same way that it does for the market currently, which is street side during permitted hours of access. And we're satisfied that there would be no adverse highway impacts, and the highways officer has not raised an objection. In terms of heritage, the council's conservation officer has no objection to the principle of the change of use. They recommend that the precise details of that roller shutter and the gas flue are secured through conditions, And subject to these conditions, we're satisfied that the change of use will preserve the special historic interests of the building and also the character and appearance of the conservation area which it sits in. In terms of flood risk then, you will have seen that late representation. We've sought some advice from Natural Resources Wales because while the site is currently within an area which has low to no flood risk, under new flood risk maps which have been released, which factor in climate change in the future, the site would go into a flood zone which has a higher risk of flooding, and that zone is called Flood Zone 3. So you'll see from the late representation that Natural Resources Wales have not objected to the proposal because the range of uses continue to fall within the same category of less vulnerable development, which is the same as the market is at the moment. So less vulnerable development means unlike residential development, which is highly vulnerable development, people have the ability to choose whether they visit the building and when they can leave. So they're not compelled to visit, they're not compelled to stay there, it's not their place of residence. And on that basis, NRW have not objected. They do recommend that the applicant consider flood resilience measures and that they are made aware of the flood risks. And we've done this by imposing an informative on the consent. And so on that basis, we're satisfied with the proposal in terms of flood risk. So to sum up, we're satisfied with the proposed change of use and we are recommending that the application is granted with conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gail. Are there any questions? Councillor Markford.
Could you just talk to how many entrances and exits there are, and are there any dangers from fire regulations? Yeah, sure.
So I believe there are two entrances. They're both internally, so there's no external entrance into the vaults as is existing. In terms of fire safety, that's very much covered by building regulations, so they're going to have to get building regulations approval, which I understand they're going through that process at the moment, but that sits separate really to the planning process.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question, obviously with ventilation, heating and such down there, is there anything proposed at the moment? Do the windows open for ventilation, or is it going to be air-conditioned units only?
Yeah, so I mentioned the list of building consents, so there's a lot of internal works to make these units into spaces which are ventilated, have got heating. So yes, it is proposed. They're internal works. We're looking at those through the list of building consent, but not really part of this change of use application.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Could we have a condition put on the external windows not to be changed in any way? What I'm concerned about, if it is any food outlets, then likely they're going to have some sort of fans, extractor fans and what have you, and that will be detrimental to the visual impact on the market itself. So I'd like a condition put on there, if possible, that none of the windows, external windows, are to be changed unless it comes back to committee.
There's only, I'll show you the elevation again.
I know the elevation. There's small windows at the bottom.
So these small windows, yeah. So they're not proposing they're proposing to refurbish those windows. The conservation officers looked at those proposals. They're satisfied with them. So no new windows are proposed as part of this proposal.
What I'm concerned about, that extractor fans will be installed in them. Could we have a condition to prevent that happening?
Tracy, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So just to confirm, as a listed building, they wouldn't be able to undertake any works to those windows without our prior consent. So those changes that you're concerned about, Councillor Watkins, would be captured by the requirement for a fresh listed building consent.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tracy.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay, can we have a proposer for the recommendations of granted with conditions, please? Councillor Linden, seconder. Councillor Harvey. All those in favour? Councillor Watkins? Yeah. Okay. That's carried. Thank you unanimously. Thank you. The last on the agenda is item 5. Agenda item 5, which is appeals decision paper in line, which is for information only. Okay. Thank you all very much, and we'll be in touch with the proposals for the site visit. Okay? Thank you.